Greetings, brothers and sisters. Again, if you're hearing any audio issues, please let me know. I got a microphone coming, but I think I fixed the problem. But anyways, so I want to do a little introduction today. I got some JoJo Magoo news, gaffes, like whatever is going on with him, and a few other things to get to. But I want to start off with this one comment here, and the person writes. Let me make this bigger here so I can read it. So the person writes, and this is to God Help Us All, my video, God Help Us All. And the person writes, I know people are over Israel right now. 2 Sabbaths ago, my friend met a family whose daughter was murdered by being stabbed in their throat by a young Palestinian boy. It's very important you understand that they're brought up to hate and murder Jewish people. Just because she's a girl and in jail for 8 years doesn't mean the detainment was unjust. It is absolutely just. No government is perfect. There is mass corruption here in America, but Palestinians are not welcome even by Muslim countries. Egypt and surrounding countries don't want them. Why? Because even their young are vicious. Okay, so I'm just assuming this person is legitimate and not some, I think the person's left comments before. But the thing is, historically, at least as far as I can tell, based in the available data, because, history is mostly manipulated and lied about. But there was a country called Palestine before 1948. And people say it wasn't a legitimate country. It wasn't recognized, all these things. But the Israeli people and the Palestinian people outnumbered the Jews, but the Palestinian people were in control of that country, and the Jewish people were tolerated. They were, weren't being abused before that time. Like, it wasn't like say in India when the British left, and the Muslim and the Hindus were at each other's throats, and so they divided the countries into India and Pakistan. Like, Pakistan is really a part of India, but then it was given its own separate country, right? Because of the hostilities that were there. Let's say, people from Mexico or Canada or, I don't know, any China even, I don't know. There was a group of people, let's just say it's from Mexico. Or let's say it's from China, because that's probably more accurate because it's not a bordering country. Let's say they just started to bring Chinese people in here. And the amount of people that were coming from China was maybe like 50 million. And they decided to take America and divide it up and give these new people from China all the coastal areas, all the quality land, and that China would be a legitimized country, but what used to be known as America isn't, right? And you would have to give up your houses, your houses, your nice houses, to Chinese people who were, just coming in from some foreign country. Or it could be, like I said, Mexican people or, Russian people or any number of, whatever it is. That there was a bunch of immigrants that came in, and those immigrants created a block of people, and they decided to, and it was even less. It was probably around what would be about 5-10 million people. Like, it was a small percentage of Jewish people. And they divided up the country, the UN, in a way that was unfair to the Palestinian people. When the Palestinian people didn't want this, and their country wasn't recognized and Israel was. And then there started conflict that later out, Israel pretended to be the victim, but it later came out because of the, stuff that happened with USS Liberty, that Israel was actually the aggressor in these, like the 6-Day War and these other things, right? And since then, Palestinian people have been moved into this open-air prison, and they're being abused, and they are controlled completely and dominated by the Israeli people. That's a fact that we all know. In fact, many Jewish people have exposed this to be true. There's people in Israel that are, just aware of the plight of the Palestinian people and are really upset by it and have come out in social media platforms and other places. So this is, Jewish people who are upset by the treatment of Palestinian people, right? And so that's all there, right? So, some of that is there's whatever story I've just told you is, based in fact more than this person's perspective, right? Because this person's saying that oh, I gotta make it big again. I lost it. I X'd out of it. The person's saying this right here. This is the key thing that you can tell that they're lying here, right? Or they're, it says uh, no government is perfect, and the mass corruption here in America, but Palestinians are not even welcome by other Muslim countries. Well, why do they have to be welcome? Egypt and surrounding countries don't want them. Why? Because because even their young are vicious. Which is what they're young. Like saying they're young, that's ascribing them being animals, right? Like saying they're young or vicious, that's saying that they're basically animals, right? It's talking about them like they're livestock. Those animals over there, their babies or even their children are vicious. But why do they have to leave, right? Why should they leave a country that used to be known as Palestine? Why should they leave? Why do these other countries rejecting them? Why are they being forced out of their country? Like you're admitting to that they don't want to leave. The Palestinian people don't want to leave, right? So, they're being forced out by oppressors. You're oppressing them. So you can't call their young vicious or their reactions of like unfair because they're being abused by a superior force. They're being occupied, abused, and they've been treated to like a concentration like camp existence. The same thing that you've been claiming as a people, that is, that's the Holocaust. You're doing a Holocaust to the Palestinian people. You're treating them the way that you were treated in Germany. Israel isn't being bashed. The truth is being told, right? There's people who are, whatever, unhinged, and, they're making a big deal about all that stuff. But I'm talking about people who are just telling you the truth, because I'm not, slamming people as as a whole. This isn't all Jewish people, because I've said before, there's Jewish people who are sympathetic to the plights of the Palestinian people. Some of the stuff I found out was through Jewish people who are posting on, there's various groups on social media, Facebook. They have a big following, and they post videos, and they've talked about this, right? People who are from a Jewish background are upset by the way that their country is treating another country, just like I'm upset about the way America treated Libya, right? Like, there's no sense of me saying America's perfect, because it's certainly not. America's an evil empire, and we're bullying other countries. Like I'm, somebody who, I have Italian, Albanian, German, and Sicilian. Sicilian, Albanian, German, and Irish. I forgot the Irish part. And, some part of me is connected to those countries just because of, slightly connected to them. But if they did bad things, I wouldn't stand up for them. I'd be fair about it. Maybe slightly I'd be a little bit more prejudiced towards those countries. And same thing with America. I've lived here my whole life. I love America, the country itself, the land. And this is the culture I'm from. And, I've rooted for America and the Olympics and other, whatever it is. But I recognize America as being an evil empire, part of an evil empire, and, part of an abusive system. So I'm, fair about my background. And, Saj Marg Heartfulness, when Heartfulness collapsed and Daji, the master president of the system, has run the system into the ground, and corruption and just goofiness and stupidity, I've been honest about that, right? And it's painful for me. That's the most painful thing. But I have to be honest, and honest about myself, right? I see, whatever, the character flaws I have, and, I meditate. So I'm fairly objective about these things. I mean, everyone's going to be somewhat subjective. Everyone's going to have, an ego involved. But for me, and I don't really care that much, because I believe the system as a whole needs to come down. The whole system, I believe it's the Kali Yuga, and that this is, the end of something negative to give birth to something of a spiritual nature, a blossoming of an awakening of a spiritual, spiritual consciousness and things like this. But this person saying that they're young or vicious, well, you have to take some responsibility. You're not a victim here. You're not, as a people, aren't a victim. Israel isn't a victim. You've oppressed a people, and you're, lying about it and deceiving yourselves and lying about the news is lying about it and making like you're the victim when you're not, right? You've created a hostile situation there. That's gone on for 3,000 years. And both sides think they're right. And the reason why these other countries don't want Palestinian people is because the Palestinian people belong in Palestine. And that nobody wants a whole influx of immigrants that have some of them might be doctors and have some skills, but, nobody can absorb 100,000 people or 20,000 people in a, small country from, whatever. You can't absorb them. And whatever humanitarian aid you get from the UN, all that stuff doesn't last. And these countries are corrupt and whatever. They're just going to breed prejudice. And, when there's going to be ethnic cleansing because people don't matriculate into other countries. And the reasons they don't want the Palestinians is because of that, right? And they belong in Palestine. They belong in a country that was formerly known as Palestine. So the very thought that you're saying, this person's saying, oh, they should leave the country. Well, why should they? Because God gave you that country? Only because you believe that. A God that's, is a punk and a narcissist, in the Old Testament. I've talked about that specifically. That isn't God. That's a demonic being that people are worshiping. That is, it's a human being, a bad person. Not even a good human being, a bad person who's petty and narcissistic and aggressive and hostile and vengeful and all these things, wrathful. God isn't meant to be feared. God is love. People create fear. People are scary. God is not. I was thinking about this. I just went and looked it up. It reminded me what I was saying here. And so I found this. Who put together the Bible in what year? So I was interested in how the Old Testament and the New Testament came together. The Old Testament is the Jewish Bible. I forget what it was called. It has a specific name. And the Old Testament is the post-related collected works of Jesus' disciples. And it says the Old Testament books were written well before Jesus' incarnation, and all of the New Testament books were written by roughly the end of the 1st century A.D. But the Bible as a whole was not officially compiled until the late 4th century, illustrating that it was the Catholic Church who determined the canon or lists of books. The Bible under the guidance of the Holy Spirit. So they're saying they were channeling the Holy Spirit to tell them what to put in and what not, which is significant because I have all these Christians that tell me channeling is bad. But all the books that were written by the apostles were channeled. They were after Jesus died, including specifically the books of Paul, who never met Jesus. And Paul's books were very significant in a lot of ways. It says the Bible under the guidance of the Holy Spirit. Indeed, the Bible is not a self-canonizing collection of books, as there's no table of contents included in any of the books. Although the New Testament canon was not determined until the late 300s, so it was 400 years after Jesus died, they decided to merge the books. And this is the Catholic Church that many Christians claim not to be Christianity, right? Catholic Church was the original church. But Christians claim that it's, whatever it is, right? That somehow it's, it was not the official church, even though their church was created by the King of England, a king, right? So, this is the problem with religions. This is what they do. Although the New Testament canon was not determined until the late 300s, books the church deemed sacred were early on proclaimed at Mass and read and preached and otherwise. Early Christian writings outnumbered the 27 books that would become the canon of the New Testament. So there was lots of other books that were there that they excluded even then. I've said this over and over again. They edited out books, right? They edited out the, things that were like spiritual in nature. The shepherds of the church, in the process of the spiritual discernment and investigation into the liturgical traditions of the church spread throughout the world, had to draw clear lines of distinction between books they are truly inspired by God and originated in the apostolic apostolic period, and those which only claim to have these qualities. The process culminated in 382 as the Council of Rome, which was convened under the leadership of Pope Damascus, promulgated the 73 book scriptural canon. The biblical canon was reaffirmed by the regional council of Hippo and Carthage, and then definitely reaffirmed by the ecumenical city council of Florence. Ecumenical. I know that word. And the Ecumenical Council of Florence in 1942. Finally, the Ecumenical Council of Trent solemnly defined the same canon in 1546, after it came under attack by the first Protestant leaders, including Martin Luther. Martin Luther wanted everyone to be able to read the Bible, and it wasn't just for, it was back then you could only be a priest. It was written in Latin, and people couldn't own a Bible. They couldn't own and possess a Bible. Think about that, right? Up to 1500. And so this is, the mess that is created in post, spiritual master, spiritual being, the saint of the system, after Jesus died. And then all these things happen with people who are pushing an agenda, because they left in things like incest and, rape and animal and people sacrifice and horrible things, cutting off the foreskins of these. David instructed to cut off the foreskins to give to a king as a dowry so he could marry his daughter. These things, right? There's all these weird, bizarre, twisted, demonic kind of behaviors, immoral stuff, and things that are not allowed, or things that are part of the story. And so what did they edit out, right? Like, if that's the stuff they left in, then what did they edit out? The same thing is happening to my Saj Marg organization right now, the Heartfulness organization. I'm going to put this at the end of the video for obvious reasons, because some people don't want to hear this, and that's fine. I'm not forcing it on anybody, especially if this is, they're the best that they can do in terms of their relationship to God. Like, some people are just, the highest level they can attain is to be in a religion, and you don't want to question their faith because reasons that I've explained in other videos. And I'm not trying to convert people or undermine their faith, but this is my YouTube channel, and this has been my experience, and I've had all these people in the Christian tradition question what I'm doing and say it's demonic, and but you don't even think about this stuff, right? Like, you look at the stuff that I'm doing, and you, out of ignorance, and just because you've been told everything else but what you're doing is a pathway to hell, and there's just lies and misrepresentation of truth, and the marriage between the Old Testament and the New Testament, which are completely different books, and Jesus came down to do something new. He wasn't creating a separate form of Judaism. He was creating a new path, but they decided to merge these two books, which has been detrimental in so many different ways, because now they're linked to this, violent, wrathful God, and people's, fear of God, God-fearing people, these things. God's not meant to be feared, right? God is, God has destruction. God is destructive. That's one of the things God is. And destruction is destruction, and we fear destruction. And things die. God's will is that things end, and death is something that we all have an innate fear of, so there's that. But that doesn't mean, and God is truth. And when you're living a lie and your ego is deceiving itself, and the truth is kryptonite to an ego, then God's is scary. Only when you're not right with God and you're not willing to accept the truth. The truth is only scary as when your whole being, your whole essence, your whole reason for being, your whole, ethos is a lie, is a deception. And so when the lie gets exposed, it's life-threatening. It's, crushing, right? It'll crush you. But these are dysfunctional religions, and the countries that have come out of these religions, I'm talking about all the religions in the world, certainly, but The Christian, Muslim, and Jewish religions are all dysfunctional and have issues that have created a warped perception of divinity, and they're aggressive and hostile with each other. And there has been these conflicts that have gone on for centuries now, thousands of years. And, it has to be eradicated and not one side winning, because that would be counterproductive. The whole ideology, the whole religions, the whole everything about it has got to go. But think about this. We all grew up as Christians, all of you guys who grew up in Christians. And if you grew up in America, even if you didn't grow up as a Christian, the Christian teachings and the ethos of Christianity and all of it is a part of your consciousness, right? How many of you have ever questioned or wanted to know how the Old Testament and the New Testament got put together? And so there was some random teachings of disciples, and they're saying they don't know which ones were legitimate or which ones weren't. So these were teachings that have been translated into multiple languages, right? It started off in Aramaic and Hebrew, these various there's various writings that were there based in the person writing them. And so after Jesus died, there was whatever period that disciples lived on. Let's say they all were dead after 40 years, right? They were all in their 20s, 30s, whatever it was. 40, 50 years, they were all dead. And in that 40 or 50 years, they compiled some works, St. Paul, whatever, to him as well, even though he didn't meet Jesus directly. And there was these works that were describing Jesus' teachings. Again, they weren't directly out of Jesus' mouth, and then they were translated, and things get lost in translation. They're eventually translated into Latin, and then eventually translated into English. And then there was these various different Bibles. There's these different Bibles. There's, of course, the King James Bible, but then there's all these other ones that are there. If you look up Bible Hub, and their interpretation and the words that they use are quite different. And so 400 years went by, and they decided to merge the Old Testament, again, which was some version of the Jewish Bible, with the New Testament for no discernible reason, because Jesus came down and was clearly against and evolved out of his religious teachings, his religion. He became a spiritual person. He left his religion behind, like I've done, and so many people have done, and become a spiritual person where you have an internalized relationship with God. And it's a big step. And it changes you. You no longer are part of that religion. I was born a Catholic, but my Catholicism is part of me, but I'm no longer a Catholic. I'm a spiritual person. I'm connected to God through my heart directly through the Sajmark system, which is a facilitator of this connection. And it is a direct relationship with God, and God now and my soul communicate with me. And my ability to communicate is based in my effort and my, whatever I do to facilitate and enable that connection, right? And how willing I am. And so, it's each spiritual person you're now on a whole new thing. And it's not easy, and it takes a lot of work and effort. It takes a lot of fighting back against your own ego that is sabotaging your connection with the divinity within you. It's something that I've, worked on, and it's, work in progress, right? But it's a step where you leave your religion behind. It's not like you don't believe in God anymore, but you realize your religion is an impediment to your connecting to God. And Jesus recognized that Judaism was an impediment to his connection with God. And so he started to see things differently. He traveled to India. And again, why isn't the Mahabharata part of the Bible? Like, that's part of Jesus' teaching. He went and he learned things in India that's been fairly well documented. And it makes sense because most saints, all spiritual people at some point go through India, because even though, there's issues with India, which I've talked about extensively in my journey series, it's a place where meditation and spiritual evolution has been like central. It's a central location. It's the center for spiritual evolution. Historically, that's the case. The religious history and the teachings that have come out of India are so vast the Vedas and the teachings in these spiritual traditions, and the stories and the discovery of the soul. And I've had people question me saying that, like whether the soul was discovered 200,000 years ago in India. And I didn't say 200,000 years, somewhere between 200,000 years and 100,000 years ago. Because when I first wanted to figure out when the Mahabharata happened, and that's 5,000 years ago. But then there was the Ramayana before that, which was another incarnation of Vishnu. And that seemed to be anywhere from 150,000 to 200,000 years ago, or maybe, who knows. When you're talking about that kind of time length, it's hard to get accurate historical records. You see what's happened in just 2,000 years of Christianity. But I looked it up and I wanted to compare the ages of religions. And they said Judaism was the oldest religion. And that's what I found, right? And I knew that wasn't true. And then I looked into it, and they were saying that Judaism is 5,000 years old and Hinduism is 5,000 years old, but somehow Judaism started first. And that's not true. Hinduism, or what's now known as the Hindu religion, is much older. And there are stories in the Mahabharata, for example, Karna's, the story of Karna, he was born by divine process. So his mother was able to intercommune with higher developed souls, in this case, the soul of the sun. And she was able to get impregnated by the soul and have an immaculate conception. And so that existed in the Indian tradition before Jesus. That was over 5,000 years ago. And Jesus' story is 2,000 years ago. So she was able to give birth to 6 sons, but the first one she wasn't married, and that was Karna. So she took Karna out and put him in a basket and sent him down the river. So that's the Moses story. And so some of the stuff in the Bible comes from the Indian tradition. And this is, I guess as much as something could be undisputable, and just in the time frame, right? Like this is a story that was around in India long before these other stories. And the discovery of the soul, it was called the Atman, which is a Sanskrit word. And Sanskrit is, I believe, the oldest language. And it is the language that's most consistent with somebody connecting with divinity. It's been lost. There was a Sanskrit scholar who was a part of the Sajmark system. He still is. And he used to chant and do these, he used to read from the Bhagavad Gita, and he would read in Sanskrit. And I went to listen to him, and all 3 times I listened to him, I went into a deep meditative state. I just was completely relaxed. And the language was, I didn't understand what he was saying. Then he'd translate it and he'd say what it was saying. But he would chant it, and it was like mesmerizing. I mean, it wasn't transmission like we experienced transmission in the Sajmark system, but it had a very, the effect of it. I was like, wow, that language is like there's something about it, right? And Sanskrit is, it's considered one of the oldest languages. The Indian Deccan Plateau, according to Babaji, was the first place to emerge from the ocean. Now, I lived in India. I was there. I visited numerous times. I was there for an extended visit. And there's a lot of problems there. And it's not a great place, and the culture sucks in its own way, and the overpopulation is soul-crushing, and all the stuff that goes with it. And it's a dirty place, physically dirty. The way they handle trash and sewage and things like open sewers, and there's things that are just not great. And there's lots of reasons for that. I mean, some of that has to do with the hit that the British laid on them, the hit that the British, put into them, right? The British unloaded on them. So this is, and they exploited them and, other things. British people have left behind a mess. They've taken a place that was not just the British, but the European people that were, that have gone and colonized places. Those colonies have all suffered and lost cultural things and other things. And a lot of that had to do with the Christian tradition and their idea that they were being missionaries and they were saving these souls of these people. But really what they were doing was exploiting these people, turning them into slaves and taking their resources. And they lay a hurt on all these people. So that's part of it, but India's the best, either way. And, I'm probably never going to go back. And there's things that I love about India. And there's a point in my life where I thought I might never leave. That really wasn't an option, though, like just in terms of citizenship. And it's really hard to become a citizen, and, it just wasn't going to be. And I'm glad it didn't happen. I'm, more comfortable here in America. But in terms of my understanding about the spiritual tradition in India, I've had wonderful spiritual experiences there. The ashrams and the ability to meditate there is substantial. The experiences you can have there in India, it's just less noisy and more peaceful, even though it's a noisy place. And I've talked about this extensively in the Journey series. And so there's something there. Like, it's undeniable for people who are open-minded and open-hearted and were willing to experience that. And Jesus passed through there. Like, I'm pretty sure of it, like as much as I could be, because of his teachings are very, his teachings have yogic principles and things in them. He has, teachings that come from that part of the world. So Jesus was exposed to these teachings somewhere. And they would, the powers that be don't want you to know that. If they knew that Jesus went to India, because they knew, there's records of it. He talked about it. His disciples knew about it. What would that say if Jesus went and learned about spirituality in India? What would that say to the, what would it do to this idea that he was the only Son of God? That he actually, some of his teachings came from India and not from just the Jewish tradition, or really from the fact that he was born as a divine Son of God. It would obliterate that idea. So they had to scrub that, right? They had to scrub all these types of things. But there's historical records of, Yahshua going to India. There's places where in India it talks about this person that came there that clearly was Jesus. And so, these are ancient, teachings and things. And again, 2,000 years, they are whatever they are. But either way, there's stuff that existed in the, the Mahabharata and in the tradition of the Indian tradition that is taken into the Bible. There's other things to do with, I believe is it Isis or Horus, Isis's son Horus. There's similarities between the story of Jesus and Horus. So much so, there are people say that Jesus never existed. It's really talking about Horus, right? And of course, Horus, the Egyptians were connected to extraterrestrials. The pyramids were built by aliens and things like this, which again throws a monkey wrench into all the things that we believe and we've been taught. And the pyramids are undeniably, we can't build them today. We could not reconstruct those pyramids, even with all our machinery and our technological advancements and our computer technology, AI. We don't have the physical abilities to rebuild those pyramids. But they built those with slaves, like these giant stones that they put in these pyramids, and they're all over the world. How were their pyramids all over the world if the world wasn't connected and everybody was primitive? And so, it's just there for people to see or not see. But you understand this, that the Bible is an amalgamation of these other teachings from other parts of the world. Stories from Egypt, stories from the Indian tradition. And so it isn't even a clean book in that sense, that it isn't, accurate, because some of these things are not Jesus' story. They have been brought in for whatever reason, to embellish the story, or whatever reason that these people decided to include these things, or maybe it was just things that people said that were inaccurate. I went on Facebook one day, and one of my young Indian friends that does Saj Mark, don't know the guy, never met him. I had a lot of these people who friended me because, I was, somewhat well-known or whatever as a practitioner of the system. And, it gets recommended because I had other friends who do the meditation, right, being what we call abhyasis. And I'm going to include this in the Journey series. I put in things here that should be a part of that. But this young man posted a picture of Santa Claus, and he photoshopped in the face of Charity, the third master of the system, as Santa Claus, right? And it was really disrespectful to Charity and weird. And, of course, Santa is Satan. It's spelled bad. I mean, the whole thing there. Santa is a distraction from Jesus, right? People think of Santa as being the reason for Christmas, but it's Jesus' birth. And people have lost, it's become so materialistic. And so this person doing it with Charity, and I very seldom write to anybody and correct them, but I'm like, dude. And the guy said, well, I was just sharing it. Someone else shared it, and I'm just, I didn't make it. I'm like, well, But that's the kind of thing I'm talking about. Like, people will embellish things, and they'll try to, they'll make things up. They'll change the story to impress people, or, maybe they have good intentions at first. But, it's just like playing that game, phone tag or phone call. What's it called? Telephone, where you whisper something in somebody's ear and they whisper in somebody else's ear. Whatever that game is called. And don't tell me, don't care, I don't need to know. And it's a game we played when we were kids. At the end, it's completely different than what the person started with. That people will say things, that are, it's like doing Mad Libs. So it's like doing biblical Mad Libs. And so when the essence of your system is lost and the spiritual being who was there and the essence of being around that person is lost, all you have is books and teachings. And those books and teachings are warped and manipulated to create a power structure, and we see that in the religions. That has undeniably happened, right? And all of us can see it. So, it's just there to be seen. And so how many people ask the question, why is the Old Testament and the New Testament put together? Because one is very different than the other. And the Old Testament is what Jesus grew up with. And the New Testament was a new darshan, a new dharma, a new, what do they call it? Dogma or doctrine, right? Official doctrine. And these guys were getting the official doctrine, and they put the two books together, and they changed the books, and they, manipulated the things to suit their agenda. And so that's what you got. And so it's not accurate. You take it as the word of God, because it's not. It's, it's not even Jesus's words, never mind the word of God. And none of these books are. Like, there's always going to be human error or human manipulation or, just things that are lost in translation or whatever it is. There's always going to be something that makes it not a pure reflection. And our language isn't conducive to, English is the language of business, but it's not a good language in terms of divinity, right? Like it's said, that there's something like 40 different words for love in the Persian language, but we have one word, right? So, there's that. There's no right path here. There's no path that is the only path. There's no right path. Like, you can still connect to God through all these religions. There are people in every one of these religions that are so spiritual in their nature that they connect to God despite the religion being flawed. And those people are saintly people, but they're not the kind of people that are out there, demonizing other people and being, douchey about things and, and telling you how great their religion is and telling people they're going to go to hell. And, this guy's saying that all Palestinian people, they're young are vicious, right? Like things like that. Like, real spiritual people don't do that. People are connected to God. Like, they see that there is, their path isn't the only path in terms of, the people that do it aren't better than other people. Like, the best path to me that ever existed is the Sajmark path. And the people that do Sajmark, like, I don't, like, want to deal with any of them, right? I'm completely cut off from the people that used to, be my, brothers and sisters in the mission, right? And some of them are great people, some of them are saintly, but they're still people. People always suck, and, we should never forget about that, and we all suck personally. And we're our own problem. Like, other people aren't our problem. The reason we're not able to connect to God is because of our own, our own stuff, not because of them. Anybody can connect to God directly. So that is a God-given thing, that we're all connected to God. We all have God inside us. Every animal, every rock, everything has divinity within it, right? And if you believe God is the creator, then that's the case, right? God created you, not out of, something evil. God created you out of himself, right? You're a part of the divine creation. If you believe in God, that's what God is. Any religion that tells you something different is manipulating you and we're warping the teachings because that doesn't make sense. When you create something, right, you could create something out of other materials. Let's say you build a table or you write a story, you write a song, whatever. When you use an instrument to express the music, the creation is like your baby, right? Whenever you create something or build something or cook something, and the more you put into it, the more it's an artistic expression, right? People make crap. People make, whatever kind of crap you buy at Walmart. But then there's things that are artistic and they're of a different level. And somebody puts a lot of love and effort into creating that. It's not just some, piece of crap thing that you bang out to, satisfy a need, but you put some work and effort into it, some artistry. And you love your creation. You're connected to it. And whatever God created is connected to God. And we're a part of that. So the idea of God being wrathful or angry in things, we're a part of God's creation, right? And we even feel about that with our own children, but it's even more so with God because it's coming from a spiritual, like we didn't create the souls of our children. God created our souls and our bodies, right? Our bodies are of a divine nature at its base, and our souls are a part of that divinity. Our souls are the pure version, the divine version of the essence of who we are. And that's created by God. And people can understand that or not. And your religion's lying to you if they're not telling you that's the case, right? And so there's divinity within every one of us. And yet how many people even work a little bit at connecting with that divinity? And people like me who do it on a regular basis and think about this all the time and work at it. I meditate every day and I, work to connect to the divinity within me. And I'm okay at it, right? Like I put a lot of effort into it. I'm a slacker and all, but I've done it for 30 years and I'm just scratching the surface, right? So, it's there for everybody, but very few people even try a little bit. And the people who are working at it are just, scratching the surface of what is their infinite divine potential that's within them. And that's for all of us. So, we don't have to worry about other countries or other people or, telling this person sucks or that person sucks. Well, you suck, right? I suck. We all suck. And so it's for each one of us to figure that out and bring out the best part of us and, become a realized soul in the sense of the divinity within us reaches its full expression and we become the best possible divine version of ourselves. The one that God has created a pathway for us to do that. We have to work at it. God's given us the ultimate goal, and we have that goal to achieve and work towards. And very few people even try to get a hint at that. And all these little prejudice, all these little petty little crappy things. And, well, these people are so bad over there, and these people, the Republicans, or the Democrats are so bad, Trump, and, all this stuff. It's just a distraction. It's you not dealing that you're a piece of shit, whatever it is. I've told that story over and over again in the Sajmarg tradition. It was told by Master Charji that a guy goes to a guru. And the guru, he says, please accept me as your disciple. And the guru says, well, you have to bring me a guru dakshina, which means like some sort of gift you have to give to the guru. He said, sure, what do you want? He goes, well, bring me the worst thing in the world. So the guy goes to look out in the world and finds one thing that's worse than the other. And, eventually he goes and he's, going to the bathroom. He's defecating. And he looks down and he sees the poop and he goes, oh, you're the worst thing. And so he goes to scoop up the poop and bring it to his guru. And the poop says, what are you doing? And he says, well, you're the worst thing in the world. I have to bring the worst thing in the world to my guru, and you're the worst. And so I'm going to bring you to my guru. And he said, what do you mean I'm the worst? I was birthday cake before I met you. I was an apple. I was, wonderful things. I was vegetables and, and whatever it might be, right? And fruit and vegetables and, whatever the person was eating. I was these wonderful things, and you turned me into this. So who's the worst thing, right? This is what you created, right? And so the disciple goes to the guru and says, I brought you the worst thing. And the guru said, what is it? He goes, it's me. And so he goes, oh, good. You get it. I'll accept you. Right. And so that's how you come in. And not that you're just a sinner. That's the problem with Christianity. You also have divinity within you. You're a sinner and you're a saint. You're both these things. And it's, the religion wants you to think you're a piece of crap all the time, and there's no divinity in you, because if they did, they'd lose. If you realize that, they'd lose control over you. And so you have both things in you. We all do. And what are you working? How are you working to bring out to minimize the one, the ego, and to celebrate and pull forth the other, which is the soul? Like, how are you embracing your soul, your divinity within you? And what are you doing to minimize and clean off the negative effects of your ego, right? To balance out your ego and to allow your soul to guide you. And so there's, a system out there that's designed specifically for that, which is the, Sajmarg meditation that I do. But, think about this. Why aren't people connecting? If God is inside of you, if God is a part of you, and if you believe in God, then if you believe in a soul, then yes, that's true. That's what that means. Having a soul means that God's inside of you. So if that's the case, if God's inside of you, you have divinity within you, and you can have a relationship with God, and God can help you get through all your troubles, get through all your problems, through all your issues throughout your life. God can facilitate, just an understanding and a support system, that all these things that you do in your life, that there's, connection to divinity. That you can have God as your friend, and you can connect to God internally, and you have an instrument of your heart where you can feel God's love, and God can help you evolve. And so you have all that, right? Why wouldn't everybody do that, right? I mean, it's a question I've seen, what I've experienced personally doing the Sajmarg system. And, there's so many millions of people that have watched my videos. And I talk about this quite extensively. And maybe 1,000 or so people have tried it. Maybe 100 or so people still do it. And I don't know if those 100 people, how well they do it. And again, it's just me. It could be, this is something that exists out there. But even in the system itself, there was the current master of the system. He got the best of the best. He got all the great stuff that Sajmarg has to offer, and I saw it. I saw him have all the spiritual experiences, all the energy, when he was made master of the system. And he pissed it all away. And now he's going out there having dinner with Modi and, doing stupid shit like that, like just, connecting with celebrities, pseudo-celebrities, and trying to be a best-selling author and getting goofy awards and looking for, approval on social media, and instead of connecting to the divinity within him. And it's just, it's depressing. Like, it's a complete bummer that somebody who was gifted, all that you could be gifted to as a human being in the spiritual realm of existence, and he pissed it all away, right? And this is the human problem. There's lots of spiritual beings that have created religions, Jesus included, that had spiritual falls, and, they had their own issues, and even though they were evolving and they connected to God, they still had, their lower tendencies are still so dominant in the human beings. And people will watch the fucking Kardashians, and they'll, whatever it might be, Cardi B and stupid stuff like that, and just sports and movies, and do all that stuff and put no effort in connecting the divinity within them. In fact, most of you guys have tuned this thing off. And it's like, I don't want to do that. You've already made your decision. And so that's the problem with humanity. You can bitch all you want about the controllers, the elite, or the Democrats, or the Republicans, or Biden. You can bitch about the Palestinians, or the Israelites, the Jews, or the whatever group. You can complain about this and that and the other thing. But you're the piece of shit that doesn't want to connect to God, right? You have divinity within you, and you're not willing to do anything about it, right? Even hearing that, oh yeah, someday I'll do something about that. Just think about that. Like, just if there was the divinity within you, and you could connect to God right now, why won't you? Like, why won't you put any effort into that? And the majority of people don't, and even the ones that do suck at it, right? So that's why humanity is like, crapping out right now. This is why we're imploding, because it's, we always go to the lowest common denominator. We bring out the worst in each other, and we look for the worst in each other, and We are focused on the drama and the worst things, and are uninterested in the divine brilliance that exists within each of us. So there you go. This is why this is why human beings are crapping out. I'm just going to put this up separately as a video because it exists in its own. It doesn't need to be a part of another thing. Only spirituality will save this world. It's Paul Romano, definitely pointing from the Apocalypse and the Ascension. Everyone have a blessed day and be grateful.